Look at me. Study me like an object. Like a sculpture erupted out of the stone of time. Antonin Artaud. Artaud le Momo. The madman. Someone in whose mind no place crystallizes. Someone who can't all of a sudden feel his soul on his left side, the heart side. Someone for whom life is a fixed point. Someone for whom the soul has no size, nor the spirit any beginnings. This flesh no longer joined in life. This tongue that can no longer pass beyond its husk. This voice no longer keeping to the paths of sound. This hand that has forgotten more than the gesture of taking and can no longer decide in which space it will achieve its grip. This brain, at last, where thought can no longer clarify itself in its lines. All these things which compose my mummy of live flesh give God a notion of the vacuum into which the need to be born has plunged me. Look. Look at me. Here, where others offer up their works, I claim to do no more than show my mind. Life means burning up questions. I can't conceive of a work detached from life. I don't like detached creation. Each of my works, each map of myself, each glacial bloom of my inner soul dribbles all over me. I want to hold my work up to life. I want it to be eaten away by external things, and most of all, by all the shivering jolts, all the twitchings of my future self. These pieces you see are leftover icicles of the mind. I claim absolute freedom. I make no distinctions between any of the degrees of myself. I refuse to recognize any map of the mind. And this is merely an icicle stuck in my throat. We must do away with the mind, just as we must do away with literature. I tell you, the mind and life communicate at all levels. I want to make a work that will derange men, that will be like an open door, leading them where they would never go of their own free will. A door simply ajar on reality.
Black poet, a virgin's breast haunts you. Embittered poet, life boils, the city is burning, and the sky dissolves in rain. Your pen scratches at the heart of life. Forest, oh forest, eyes swarming over the scattered pine grains, hair made with storms. The poets climb on horses and dogs. Eyes rage, tongues turn, the sky flows into nostrils like a nourishing blue milk. I'm hanging at your mouths, women, hard hearts made of vinegar.
Monsieur Artaud, I regret that I am unable to publish
your poems in the Nouvelle Revue Française. However, I found them sufficiently interesting to want to make the acquaintance of their author. If it is convenient for you to call at our offices any Friday between 4 and 6, I would be most happy to see you. Sincerely, Jacques Rivière.
Dear Monsieur Rivière, the question of the admissibility of these poems concerns me. I am talking about their ultimate acceptance, their literary existence. I suffer from a fearful mental disease. My thought abandons me at every stage, from the mere fact of thought to the external act of its materialization in words. Words, phrases, inner directions of thinking, simple reactions of the mind. I am in constant pursuit of my intellectual being, so whenever I can seize upon a form, however imperfect, I hold it fast, lest I lose the entire thought. It is very important to me that the few manifestations of mental existence that I have been able to give myself should not be regarded as inexistent because of the blotches and awkward expressions with which they are marred. The entire problem of my thinking is involved. For me, this is no less than a matter of knowing whether I have the right to continue thinking in verse or in prose. Antonin Artaud.
Dear Monsieur Artaud, I have read with great care what you kindly submitted to my judgment, and I think I can reassure you with respect to the feelings of anxiety revealed in your letter. There are awkward things and disconcerting oddities in your poems, but they seem to me to be due to a certain quest on your part, rather than to any lack of command over your thoughts.
Dear sir, I am not attempting to justify myself in your eyes. I care very little whether I seem to anyone to exist. The distance that separates me from myself cures me of the judgment of others. I suffer from a sickness that affects my soul in its deepest reality and infects its manifestations. The poison of being, a veritable paralysis, a sickness that deprives me of speech, of memory, that uproots my thinking. I can truly say that I am not in this world, and this is not intellectual posturing. A man possesses himself in flashes, and when he does possess himself, he does not quite overtake himself. He does not achieve the constant cohesion of his forces without which true creation is impossible. Nevertheless, the man exists. I mean that he has a distinct reality which enhances him. Is he to be condemned to nothingness because he can give only fragments of himself? I think I have said enough to make myself understood. Sincerely yours, Antonin Artaud. Acting is gesture, as in the Balinese dance. Gesture spoken through the magic of mathematics, through the intricate computations of music. Everything impersonal, regulated, not a movement of a muscle, not a rolling of the eye, but should belong to a kind of reflective mathematics which controls everything, by means of which everything happens. And in this systematic depersonalization, in these purely muscular facial expressions applied to the features like a mask, everything produces a significance Everything has the maximum effect. A kind of terror seizes the audience at the thought of these mechanized beings whose joys and griefs seem not their own, but at the service of age-old rites, as if they were directed by a superior intelligence.
Gate to erase my sins from his memory.
Plagued on it a third of my possessions. And what is left to keep my children in pampered luxury in Salamanca? Oh, God! Salamanca is not far enough away. Death is the only destination. We know by experience that those who visit that city are reluctant ever again to show their faces. Oh, how I hope to be rid of those two, my sons. Funeral candles are my only future gift to them. The great differences between the villainies acted out on stage and the villainies committed in real life is that in real life we do more and say less, while in the theater we talk endlessly and accomplish very little. Well, I shall restore the balance, and I shall restore it at the expense of real life. I shall lop off some branches from my flourishing family tree. 2 sons down here, 1 wife here. As for my daughter, I shall lop her off too, but with a different implement. Evil must be allowed its portion of pleasure. I shall torture the soul by abusing the body, and when it is done as thoroughly as a living man can do it, then let anyone try to accuse me of being a mere play actor. Let anyone dare. I am old, Count Genji, but tougher than my skinny frame may suggest. In my dreams, I often find that I am destiny personified. Yes, that is the explanation of my vices. I tell you that the fountain of hatred welling up within me is powerful enough to drown all of my nearest of kin. I know that I am a force of nature. For me, life, death, incest, God, repentance, crime do not exist. My destiny, my convictions order me to seek out evil, to practice evil. How can I resist the forces burning within me, bursting out of me? I obey my own law. I can look into myself without becoming giddy, and so much the worse for anyone who trips and topples into the abyss which I have become.
I prefer my dreams, my nightmares, to reality. I love those houses falling into the river.
Yes, I know. You are satisfied with your world. I've never met a woman like you before. You were rare. When we met, and you invited me to your home, and we walked in the garden, our steps together made me feel euphoric. There's a subtle understanding between us, but is it an ephemeral one? Is it just a whim on your part? Or is it an essential, fundamental connection? I'm afraid of deceiving myself, that it should turn out to be ordinary, that you should be a sociable woman who enjoys writing letters to writers, acting, sympathy. You keep me in terror, that it should be a dream, that you should vanish. Now you've become aloof.
But there was never a question of human love.
Then what was it a question of?
Friendship, the affinities, understanding, imaginative type.
But we are human beings.
I'm a divided being. I cannot love humanly and imaginatively at the same time. It's the poet in you that I love. That love is separated, as if by a wall, from the Anais, who has the ability to give of herself in human love. This is my affliction. Spirit and flesh never uniting.
Oh, but that is like my affliction. Human beings appear to me as spectral, and I doubt and I fear life, and I try to enter it and to become a part of it. But your glidingness, your vibrancy. I've never seen a woman look so much like a spirit. Yet you were warm. Everything about you frightens me. Enormous eyes, exaggerated eyes, impossible eyes. Impossibly clear. There seems to be no mystery behind them, as if one could look through them immediately. But there are endless mysteries behind that clarity, behind that naked fairy tale face, soft and frail, and treacherous. People think I'm mad. Do you think I'm mad? Is that what frightens you? I've told you I take too much opium and other things as well, that sooner or later you will despise me anyway, that I am not made for sensual love. It has so much importance for women.
No, not for me.
Drugs are killing me. I will never be able to make you love me, to hold you. You are a human being and you want a whole love.
I don't want that kind of bond with you. But another, on another plane.
The revolution will come soon. The world will be destroyed. It is corrupt and full of ugliness. It is full of mummies, decadence, and death. You are the plumed serpent. You glide over the earth, but your plume stirs the air, the mind. The small detail of your coming tonight, dressed as you are, shows our affinity. That alone is amazing to me. And your ecstasy, too, is strange and different. It does not come in spurts. It is continuous. You live continuously on one level. You use a certain tone, and you never depart from it. And your talk is unreal.
crucify a being like you. So evanescent, so elusive. Why do you make an impression of evil, cruelty, and seductiveness, trickery, superficiality? Is it an appearance? I hated you at first as one hates the all-powerful temptress. I hated you as one hates evil. Between us, there could be a murder.
I must go. Where? To the Café Flore to meet my father. He's suffering from nostalgia and wants his children about him.
Your father? I sense that you never loved me. Your father, yes. I see. All of my doubts about you were right. Your feelings have no stability. And this love of yours for your father is an abomination. You give everyone the illusion of a complete love. And I am not the only one. You have deceived many men. I sense your absolute impurity. I sense you filth, vile woman. You never loved me.
The archives of the little town of Cagliari in Sardinia contain the account of an astonishing historical fact. One night in April 1720, about 20 days before the arrival at Marseille of the Grand Saint-Antoine, a ship whose landing coincided with the most amazing outbreak of the plague
Cagliari
in that city's
in
memory.
Sardinia contained the account of an astonishing historical fact.
Had a particularly afflicting
One
dream.
night
He
in
saw
April
himself
1720,
infected by
about
the
20
plague.
days before the arrival at Marseille
was
of
ravaging
the
his
Grand
tiny state.
Saint-Antoine, a ship whose landing coincided with the
Beneath
most
its
amazing
scourge,
outbreak of the plague in that city's memory.
All social form
Saint-Remy,
disintegrates.
the viceroy of Sardinia, had a particularly
Order
afflicting
collapses.
dream.
He observed
He saw himself
every
infected by the plague.
infringement of
He
morality,
dreamed of
every
ravaging his
psychological
mind state.
disaster.
Beneath such a scourge,
Saint-Remy wakes from his fearful dream, but is it too late to avert the
He
scourge?
observed every infringement of morality, every psychological
When the Grand Saint-Antoine, a month out of Beirut, asks for permission to dock
Saint-Remy
at
wakes from his
Cagliari, the
fearful dream,
viceroy
but is it too
replies
late
with
to
an
avert the
insane,
scourge?
despotic order.
When the Grand
Tack about
Saint-Antoine,
immediately,
a
make
month
full
out of
sail
Beirut,
away from
asks for
town,
permission to
under
dock
threat
at
of
Cagliari,
being sunk by
the
cannon
viceroy
shot.
replies with an insane,
The
despotic order.
communication
Tack about immediately, make
between
full sail away from the
Saint-Remy
town
and
under
the
threat of
plague
being sunk by
strong
cannon
enough
shot.
to liberate itself as
communication
images in
between
his dream is not
Saint-Remy
strong
and the
enough
plague.
to infect him with
Strong
the
enough to
disease.
infect him with the
War
disease
against
is
the
not
plague.
strong enough to infect him with the disease. War against the plague.
Between the victim
of the plague, who runs in shrieking pursuit of his visions,
pursuit of his visions,
and the actor in pursuit of his feelings.
in pursuit of his feelings.
Between the man who invents for himself
himself personages.
He could never imagine without the plague creating them in the midst of an audience of corpses and delirious lunatics and the poet who inopportunely invents characters, entrusting them to a public equally inert or delirious.
Entrusting them to a public.
There are other analogies which confirm the only truths that count and locate the action of
there are other
like
analogies
that
which
of the
confirm
plague
the
on
only
the level of a veritable
locate the action of the theater like that of the plague.
Considered
on the level of a veritable
the physical
epidemic.
effects of the disease.
Consider the physical
Before the
effects
onset of any physical or mental discomfort, the body is covered with red.
Before the onset of any physical or mental
notices when they suddenly
discomfort,
turn black.
body is covered with red
Begins to
spots,
boil,
which
and to
the
grow
victim
overpoweringly
notices when they
heavy
suddenly
and
turn black. His head begins to boil and to grow overpoweringly heavy, and he collapses. He is seized by a terrible fatigue, the fatigue of a centralized magnetic suction of his molecules divided and drawn toward their annihilation. His crazed body was unsettled, and coating will seem to be flooding through his flesh. The inside of his stomach seems as if it were trying to gush out between his teeth. His pulse boiling of fever within, constant with the stinging action of his mind beating and hurrying through. When his heart grows intense, heavy, loud, his eyes first inflamed, then glazed, his swollen, gasping tongue first white, then red, then black, as if charred and split. And soon the body moves. Furrowed like the earth, struck by lightning, like lava kneaded by subterranean forces, turns for an outlet. Around these forces, the skin rises and blisters like air bubbles under the surface of lava. The outermost point indicates the extreme limit of a bubo. Around the anus, and the armpits, in the touch places where the active glands faithfully perform their functions, the buboes appear wherever the organism discharges its internal rottenness. Are a frenzy. The obedient son kills his father. The chaste man performs sodomy or his neighbor. The dregs of the population. Greed, these riches they know will serve no purpose or profit. And at that moment, the theater is born. The theater. That is an immediate, gratuitousness provoking acts without use or profit. The theater, like the plague, is in the image of that carnage. It disengages powers, it liberates possibilities, it releases conflicts. And if these powers and these possibilities are dark, it is not the fault of the plague, nor of the theater, but of life. The theater, like the plague, compels men to see themselves as they are. It causes the mask to fall. It reveals the lie. It invites them to take a superior and heroic attitude they would never have assumed without it. It is a crisis which is resolved by death or cure. The theater, like the plague, acts to collectively drain social and moral abscesses. And the question is whether, in this slippery world which is committing suicide without noticing it, there can be found a nucleus of men capable of imposing this superior notion of theater. Men who can restore to all of us the natural and the magic equivalent
of the dogmas in which we no longer believe. People who leave the obscure and try to define whatever it is that goes on in their heads are pigs. All those who have some vantage points in their spirits, I mean on some side or other of their heads, and in a few strictly localized brain areas. All those who are masters of their language, all those for whom words have meaning. All those who are the spirit of the times and have named the currents of thought, that automatic grinding that delivers their spirits to the winds, are pigs. Those for whom certain words have meaning. Those for whom emotions are classifiable and who quibble over some degree or other of their hilarious classifications. Those who still believe in terms. Those who brandish whatever ideologies belong to the hierarchy of the times. Those about whom women talk so well, and those women who talk so well. Those who follow paths, who drop names, who fill books with screaming headlines, are the worst kind of pigs. No works of art, no language, no word, no thought, nothing except maybe a fine eruption of the brain, a sort of incomprehensible and totally erect stance in the midst of everything in the mind. And don't expect me to tell you what all this is called, or how many parts it could be divided into, and don't expect me to tell you its weight, or to get back in step and start discussing all this so that by discussing I may get lost myself, and without realizing it, start thinking. These states that have no name, these sublime situations of the soul, these intervals of wit, these minuscule failures, they are the daily bread of my hours. And they're the same old words I'm always using, and I don't seem to be making much headway in my thoughts. But I'm making more headway than you bearded asses. You pertinent pigs, you masters of fake verbiage, confectioners of portraits, entomologists, plague of my tongue. Now look, I no longer have the gift of tongue, but that is no reason for you to persist and stubbornly insist on opening your mouths. Look, I will be understood years from now, and then my guises will be recognized, my gay glaciers will be seen, the secret of diluting my poisons will have been learned, the plays of my soul will be deciphered. Then all of my hair and all of my mental veins will have been drained in quicklime. Then my bestiary will have been noticed and my mystique become a hat. Lines will be seen and the geometry of the void understood. People will learn what the configuration of the mind is. And then they will see why my mind is not all here. And then they will see all languages go dry, all minds parched, all tongues shriveled up, the human face flattened out, deflated as if sucked up by shriveling leeches, and all of this then will be seen to be all right. And I will have no further need to speak. I came to Mexico to make contact with the red earth. And she stinks and she smells sweet. She smells good and she's stinking.
Symbolized by volcanoes and snakes. Water, symbolized by multiple gods, the infinite faces of Tlahuac and feathers of birds roaming the storms. Air, symbolized by slings of birds, from the thunderbird to the Swetzel bird, the most precious of all sky birds. Fire, symbolized again by the thunderbird and by the volutes of volcanoes.
I have heard that your god, Siguri Peyote, awakens in men's minds the memory of supreme truths, that Peyote restores to men's minds a knowledge of the infinite. Water in the air and the earth in the sea. They are not yet insane enough. They are not enough at each other's throats. And the more furious, the more enraged, the nearer and dearer they are. Here, where the mother eats her sons, power eats power. Short of war, no stability. I shall speak what I have seen and what is. And to say it, since the astrologers no longer know how to read, I shall base myself on the tarot. The tarot has spoken in heaven. 14, temperance, self-mastery. 1, juggler, standing, properly directed will. 11, strength, spiritual energy. 17, star of the Magi, regeneration. 10 of batons, harmony. King of cups, domination. Ace of cups, will at the service of the senses. The absolute male of nature has begun to move in the heavens. This means that man is to recover his stature, and that he will recover it against men. A man is to reimpose the supernatural. The supernatural is man's reason for being, and man has betrayed the supernatural in himself. Heaven has invoked the forgotten femininity of woman. It has used the power that woman had neglected. This means that nature is about to revolt. Earth, water, fire, heaven. The transmutation will be performed by the 4 elements gathered together. The reclassification of all values will be fundamental, absolute, and terrible. But how will this terrible reclassification of values take place? By what means? Through what? By woman. Through woman. By woman indirectly enlightened and achieving her own duplicity. This means that a natural force is about to free itself. A dark death force. It has the dark rapaciousness of the genital. It is provoked by woman, but man directs it. The mutilated femininity of man, the enchained tenderness of man have revived a virgin on that day, but it was a virgin without a body, without sex, one that only the mind could profit by. That which makes us men and which has separated woman from man, is in the process of withdrawing from men, of observing and judging us, and all that permits us to exist and that sees how badly we have subsisted and how badly we have kept the virile principle in us, leaves us but in order to come down around us. And the revolution that we did not know how to make will be made by the universe against us. And by whom will this superior transmutation be performed? By a madman, who is also a wise man and who himself sees he is a wise man and a madman. This means that I, who am speaking, have a sword and a staff with 13 knots, and this staff bears on the 9th knot the magic sign of the thunderbolt, and 9 is the number of destruction by fire, and I foresee a destruction by fire, and this destruction has begun everywhere, and I claim that it is secretly willed by everyone as the only means of saving us from a world where life can no longer function. Now, because I foresee total destruction by earth, water, fire, and by a star that shall occupy the total surface of the air in which the spirit of man has bathed, I preach total destruction, but conscious and rebellious destruction. This means burning is a magic act, and that we must consent to burning in advance and immediately, not a thing, but everything that represents things for us, in order not to expose ourselves to being burnt up whole. I took a walk with this cane, and I went to the Dumagot, to La Capole, the Dome, most every place in Paris. I showed it to André Breton and to several other friends who examined it rather closely. My friend René Thomas, who lived at 21 Rue d'Agaray at the time, gave this cane to me. He had gotten it from the daughter of a Savoyard sorcerer, mentioned in St. Patrick's Prophecy, published in the Hagiographic Dictionary, which I read for the first time in 1934 at the Bibliothèque Nationale. This cane has 200 million fibers and is encrusted with magic signs representing moral forces and prenatal symbolism. It belonged to Lucifer, who thought himself God, but was only his vampire. It passed through the hands of Jesus, who used it to fight off the demons in the desert. Here are the stains of blood from that battle, here. They can be washed away, but they reappear as fresh blood spilled from new wounds. I go to return this staff to Ireland, to those last authentic descendants of the Druids, to those who possess the secrets of their ancient knowledge, to those who know that man descended from the god of death, Despater, and to those who know that humanity must disappear by water and by fire.
Penetrated the mysteries of the world with this, the cane of Jesus Christ, pushed by gigantic forces. I have finally discovered who I am, and I have accepted what I am. Every day, the voice of Christ reveals to me the doctrine of life and death, the mystery of birth and incarnation. I know how the world was made, and I have received the mission to reveal it. In a few days, I will speak publicly in the name of God himself. My life is realizing its prophecies. One day you will understand these words. Tell my friends in Paris that I shall not return alone, but with an army. And you tell them that I have hated them for years, them and their social, their moral, amoral, immoral ideas. is a real madman talking to you. One who never knew the joy of being in the world until now that he has left it and become separated from it. I must make a clean break with this world, which a being in me has always refused. And this knowledge of no longer being in the world comes only with seeing that the world has left me. I have left reality behind. Dead to the world. Dead to that which is for everyone else the world. Fallen. At last. Fallen. I have a body that submits to the world and disgorges reality.
Fool to say I had ever accepted conversion to Jesus Christ. Christ is what I've always abominated most of all. My conversion was false, the result of a spell that made me swallow an unconscionable number of wafers. You unholy sanctimonious monks, beware the enraged force that comes to raise all the churches. My path is the true path, and he who does not follow my path is off any path. The enraged will pull down this church.
Is not from this side of the world, but from the other. From the cell where the shock took place, but from above, high in the room, just under the ceiling. But for long moments, there was neither cell nor ceiling for me, but just a rod above my body, floating in the air like a sort of fluid balloon, suspended between my body and the ceiling. And I'll never forget in any possible life the horrible passage of this specter of revulsion and asphyxia through which the criminal mob of beings forced the patient in extremis before letting go of him. At the bedside of a dying man, there are more than 10,000 beings, and I took note of this at that moment. There is a conscious unanimity among all these beings who are unwilling to let the dead man come back to life before he has paid them by giving up his corpse totally and absolutely. Pity that no other dead person outside myself should have returned to confirm the matter, for generally speaking, the dead do not return. The electroshock accomplished. This one didn't run its course as had the others. I felt that it wasn't going away, and my whole inward electric body
the whole lie of this inward electric body, which for a certain number of centuries has been the burden of every human being turned inside out, became in me like an immense turning outward in flames. Monads of nothingness bristling to the limits of an existence held prisoner in my lead body, which could neither get out of its lead coating nor stand up like a lead soldier. I could no longer be my body. I didn't want to be this breath turning to death all around it until its extreme dissolution. Thus, wrung out and twisted, fiber on fiber, I felt myself to be the hideous corridor of impossible revulsion. And I know not what suspension of the void invaded me with its groping blind spot, but I was that void and in suspension. And as for my soul, I was nothing more than a spasm among several chokings. Where to go and how to get out was the one and only thought leaping in my throat, locked and secure on all sides. Every wall of charred meat assured me it would be neither the soul nor the mind, because all of that is of a former world. This is what each heartbeat told me. It is I who committed suicide one day and tore my body from myself and battled against what is left of it and wish forever to come back to myself, who have founded a false world in the meantime.
I am a fanatic. I am not a madman. In a world in which every day they eat vagina cooked in green sauce of the genitals of a newborn child, whipped into a rage, plucked as it came out of the maternal sex, you say I am insane? A sick society invented psychiatry to defend itself against the investigations of visionaries whose faculties of divination disturbed it. A genuine lunatic is a man who prefers to go mad rather than forfeit a higher idea of human honor. A lunatic is a man society does not want to hear, who must be prevented from uttering unbearable truths. I am a fanatic. I am not a madman. There, where it smells of shit, it smells of being. Mankind could easily not have dropped dung, not have opened the anal pouch, but he chose to shit as he would have chosen to live rather than consent to living death. In order not to shit, he would have had to consent to non-being, but he was not able to make up his mind to lose his being, that is to say, to living death. There is in being something particularly tempting for man, and this something is precisely shit. And whence derives this abjection of filth? from that the world is not yet made of essence, or from that man has only a small idea of the world and he wishes eternally to preserve it. This arises from that man one fine day stopped the world's idea, and God himself compressed the notion. Is God a being? If he is one of dung. If he is not one, he is not so. He is not. But as the vacuum, advancing in all its shapes, the perfect representation of which is the parade of an incalculable mass of crab lice, I deny baptism in the Mass. There is no human action which on the level of inner eroticism could be more pernicious than the descent of so-called Jesus Christ upon the altars. They will not believe me. But the one named Christ is none other than that one who in the presence of the crab-louse God consented to live bodiless, while an army of men descended from the cross where God thought he had them long time nailed, rebelled and larded with iron and blood, fire and skeletons advance, reviling the invisible in order to have done with the judgment of God. All of the yoga exercises are not worth the exclamations and the count of a dead nunch when the wench spreads and quarters her.
Excuse me, Mr. Artaud. Are you ready? Okay, we'll give you a 5-second countdown. It'll go like this. 5, 4, 3, 2, and you come in, okay? 5, 4, 3, 2.
I learned yesterday one of the most sensational of those official practices of American public schools, which no doubt account for the fact that this country believes itself to be in the vanguard of progress. It seems that among the examinations or tests required of a child entering public school for the first time, there is the so-called seminal fluid or sperm test, which consists of asking this newly entering child for a small amount of his sperm so it can be placed in a jar and kept ready for any attempts at artificial insemination that might later take place. Americans are finding more and more that they lack muscle and children, that is, not workers, but soldiers. And they want at all costs and by every possible means to make and manufacture soldiers with a view to all the planetary wars which might later take place and which would be intended to demonstrate by the overwhelming virtue of force the superiority of American products. Because one must produce, one must by all possible means of activity replace nature wherever it can be replaced. One must find a major field of action for human inertia. The worker must have something to keep him busy. New fields of activity must be created, in which we shall see at last the reign of all the fake manufactured products, of all the vile synthetic substitutes in which the sperm of all the artificial insemination factories will make a miracle in order to produce armies and battleships. No more fruit, no more trees, no more vegetables, no more plants, pharmaceutical or otherwise, and consequently no more food, but synthetic products to satiety amid the fumes, amid the special humors of the atmosphere on the particular axis of atmosphere wrenched violently and synthetically from the resistances of a nature which has known nothing of war except fear. And war is wonderful, isn't it? Or it's a war, isn't it, that the Americans have been preparing for and are preparing for this way, step by step, in order to defend this senseless manufacture from all competition, which must arise on all sides. One must have armies, battleships, airplanes, soldiers. Hence, this sperm. Which it seems the governments of America have had the effrontery to think of, and of which I learned only yesterday. I must be behind the times. Or perhaps it's only a false rumor. One of those spiteful pieces of gossip circulated between sink and latrine at that hour when meals that have been ingurgitated one more time are thrown in the slop buckets. Dear Paul, I'm very sad and desperate. My body hurts all over, but above all, I feel people were cheated of my radio broadcast. Wherever the machine is, there is always the abyss and the void. There is a technical intervention that distorts and annihilates what one has done. That is why I'm through with radio and will devote myself exclusively to the theater. A theater as I conceive it, a theater of blood, a theater with which each performance will have done something bodily to the one who performs, as well as to the one who comes to see others perform. In reality, the actors are not performing, they are doing. The theater is actually the genesis of creation. This will happen. I had a vision this afternoon. I saw those who are going to follow me and who are not yet completely embodied because of the pigs who eat too much. There are those who eat too much and others like me who can no longer eat without puking. I am not writing. I draw stick figures. I have finished. I have nothing more to say. I've said it all. Now I begin at the beginning like a child with stick figures. The animal gnaws at my anus. I, Antonin Artaud, am my son, my father, my mother, myself, leveler of the imbecile paraplum rooted to the family tree, the paraplum, Papa, Mummy, and infant we, crud from the ass of Grandmummy, and much more than Pa and Ma, meaning before Mummy and Papa, who didn't have a Pa and Ma, as said, and where would they have gotten them when they became that unmatched pair neither husband nor wife has been able to see, sitting or standing, before this improbable hole that the mind plumbs
hoped to find for us to disgust us a little more with ourselves for being this useless body made of meat and wild sperm. Hanging since before even the lice sweating on the impossible table of the sky. Its horny stink of atoms, its wrangly stink of abject detritus, expelled from the sleep of the Inca with mutilated finger. Starma, stupido, nota, rapido, gida, ote, cruta, for I was Inca, but no king, Gilzy. Gilzy, fa, il, para, ba, me. Getting goosed in the golden pantaloons through the root and ruins to the very core. And there was no sun, and no person, no one ahead of me, no one before me, no one to vow me. I had a few faithful who never stopped dying for me, and when they were too dead to go on living, they left only the despicable ones the same who coveted their ranks for fighting alongside them, too cowardly to fight against them. But who else saw them? No one. For it's the end, which is the beginning, and this end is the end that wipes away every means. And now, let me tell you, all of you, you've always made me shit. Why don't you go fuck a prickly pussy crab lice of eternity? Never again will I have anything to do with the ones who swallowed the iron stud of life. One day, soon after I lost my mama tit, I met up with the ones who swallowed the iron stud of life, and one of them wrestled me under it, and God poured me back to it, and the bastard died. As for me, uncomplicated, Antonin Artaud, no one can touch me when one is only a man or God. I don't believe in father, in mother. I got no papa money. Nature, mind or God, devil, body or being, life or nothingness, nothing inside or out, and above all no mouth to mouth being. Sewer drilled with teeth where man who sucked his substance from me looks to me all the time, waiting to get hold of a papa mummy and remake an existence free of me. Over and above my corpse taken from the void itself and sniffed at from time to time. I speak from above time.
Who am I? Where do I come from? I am Antonin Artaud, and let me say it as I know how to say it. Immediately you will see my present body burst into pieces and reassemble itself under 1,000 notorious aspects into a new body which will never, ever let you forget me.